all of you to get involved in your club. Without volunteers, there's no one to come and meet and talk bees with one another. And how will you learn and how will you continue to learn? So volunteer. I mean, you don't have to do a lot, but just volunteer once a week or month or something just to help with the club, because it always falls just to a few people. And when they get burned out, they go away, and the clubs often will just disappear after that. So do try to get involved. Okay, enough of that. So let me go back.
Accidentally if they're fast.
Okay, how do,
Well, let's see.
let's see.
Oh,
It's not going back. Okay.
all right, there we go. Okay. Gone, right. Oh, there we go. This is taking a minute to go
There's a
through.
big delay. Okay, all right,
All right.
let's just get started. Okay, so tonight we are going to be talking about diseases in the hive. It's not something you often see a lot of, but it is really important that you could recognize when you do have disease in the hive. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So before we can talk about what's wrong with your colony, let's review what's right with a healthy colony. So a healthy colony is going to have a laying queen. Hopefully she's going to be a young, vigorous queen. The younger queens you have, the better. As we all age, we kind of lose our vitality, and so do our queens. So having a young queen is better than an old queen, but definitely a laying queen is important for a healthy colony. We want lots of worker bees. We need a lot of bees that are going to support all those eggs that the queen is going to be laying. They all need care, feeding, all of that. So we need lots of worker bees. And we need stores of honey. We need frames of pollen, very important. We also need healthy brood. So what does healthy brood look like? Right now we're talking about an egg. So we want one egg per cell. Ideally, we would like it placed at the very bottom of the cell, facing upward. And can everyone identify eggs in their colony? Okay, so we have a lot of room to grow here. That is probably the biggest thing I spend. So I do one-on-one mentoring with brand new beekeepers, as well as hive consultations if you have a problem and you need a second look. But when I'm working with my beekeepers, that's probably the one thing I spend the most time working with them on, because there's only two things that we look for to say that a hive is queen right. We see the queen herself, or we see eggs. So I know lots of beekeepers who have never seen their queen, but we find eggs and we know that we're queen right. So being able to identify eggs in the bottom of the cell is very important. Healthy brood, again, now we're looking at larvae. We want our larvae to be nice and pearly white. We want them to be C-shaped. We want them to be floating in lots of royal jelly. Wet food, this is what we're calling. When we say, is there wet food in the hive? We want to see a lot of liquid. If you are seeing larvae at the bottom of the cell and they look dry and there's nothing wet or glistening down there, that is telling you that your hive is lacking protein. So they need pollen. If they don't have any pollen in the hive, this is the time where you're going to need to supplementally feed them some pollen set. We also want our pupae to be nice and healthy. We want flat cappings. We like the medium brown cappings. So the color of the cappings will often change because a little bit of resin is put in with the wax. So that will change the color of the cappings. But as long as it's uniform, flat, then that's what we're looking for. We don't want to see punctures or anything else going on. So this is a typical brood frame. And on our typical brood frames, our corners have capped honey. Around the brood nest, we have our arc of pollen, very important. And then we have our brood here. I'm going to take just a quick moment. So for those people that are not really good at finding eggs, I just wanted to give you a quick little help in that regard. So when you're looking for eggs, you're not pulling out a frame and looking in every single cell for an egg. What you want to do is you want to start by finding your open brood and you want to find the large old larvae right here. You can see how big they are here. And you're going to start following the larvae out until the larvae are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, so out here, the larvae are much smaller than they are right here. When you get to the smallest larvae that you can find, that's where you're going to start searching for eggs, is around those cells of the smallest larvae, because the queen is laying in concentric circles. So she's already been here, she's been out here, and now she's going to be on the far reaches. So when you're looking for eggs, be smart about it. You'll waste your time if you're looking at every single cell. So this is an example of a really nice brood frame. Again, we got our brood in the middle, we've got our pollen surrounding the brood, and we have our capped honey around the outside. So how do you know when there's something wrong? Observe, observe, observe. You need to go into your hive, you need to pull out your brood frames, and you do need to look at your brood. So there are lots of different maladies that do occur inside our hive. We have diseases that affect the brood. That would be like American foul brood, European foul brood, chalk brood, sac brood. We have what we call the Varroa virus complex. We're all well familiar with Varroa. Can't wait for that bug to go away. But from Varroa, they vector a lot of deadly viruses. So deformed wing is probably one of the most common viruses that we as beekeepers can actually see. This over here is a picture of bees that are suffering from deformed wing. They're actually born with deformed wings. And you can see here that they're all shriveled up. And these are bees that are not going to be able to contribute to the colony. They're going to die early. And again, this is something that overall is going to impact the colony health. We have paralysis viruses as well. There's 5 or 6 of them. We can kind of see those viruses. The bees will be on the ground in front of the hive. They will be, shivering sort of thing. They'll be trying to fly. They won't be able to fly. Oftentimes those bees will be hairless, so they will be black. They'll look kind of greasy because they don't have any hair on them. And again, they're kind of shivering. That would be an example of what a paralysis virus might look like. But we know that there's over 29 known viruses today. There's probably more that we just are not aware of. And then lastly, we have a disease that affects our adult bees, and that would be nosema. All right, so let's just jump right in. First, we're going to talk about American foul brood. This is highly contagious, and this is the most destructive of all brood diseases. I will say that currently in the United States, it is not a big problem, but back in the 1950s, it was a huge problem. And at that point in time was when we were no longer allowed to keep our bees in like those baskets called skeps because they could not be open. So after American foul brood kind of went through the country, certain laws were passed. We have to have hives with movable frames and removable frames so that we can actually inspect our frames. So that all came down because of American foul brood. So it is an infectious spore-forming bacteria called Patabacillus larvae. The larvae typically die just after the cell is capped. Brood pattern is scattered. So this is something that is kind of common to all diseases. One of the first things you're going to see is a real scattered brood pattern, and that's an example of that. With American foul brood, the odor can also be sulfurous, kind of like a chicken house. The cappings on American foul brood are very distinct. They range anywhere from having sunken cappings instead of the nice flat ones. We have cappings like over here that are kind of chewed out a little bit. And then we also have cappings where it's like sweating. There's fluid coming through the actual cap itself. So these are all things that as you're inspecting your hive, you might see if American foul brood was present. This is a typical test that we can do in the apiary. So when the larvae die, they melt down and they rope out. So you can bend down, pick a twig up off the ground, or carry in your bee bucket a toothpick or something. And if you stir the larvae in and then with your twig pull it out, if it ropes out over an inch, that is an indicator that you do have American foul brood. So that's a really quick down and dirty way to get a quick idea of maybe I need to follow this up a little more. So also the larvae, so there's two forms within American foul brood. You have your active and your inactive stage. So during the active stage is when it's killing our bee. After the larvae dies, the American foul brood becomes a hard black scale. And that scale adheres to the bottom of the cell. And that black scale has over 1 million spores in it. So at this point, it's in a dormant phase, these spores. And this is what's so dangerous about them, is that this dormancy can last up to 50 years to the point where they can become live again. So we have to be very careful when American foul brood is discovered. If by chance death occurs after the capping, this is what they call the pupal tongue. So this is the proboscis that pretty much gets stuck on the ceiling. It is one indicator that you have American foul brood, but this is something that is not always present. So this would just be another aha. So if you think you have American foul brood, you need to take action immediately. You need to test. So we could do our pretty informal rope out test in the apiary, but it's probably a good idea to follow it up with something a little more scientific. You can get foul brood kits from your beekeeping operations. You could also send samples to the Beltsville lab in Maryland, though who knows if there's anybody there right now to receive them. So we have that. And if you do have a confirmed case of American foul brood in California, the law does require that we burn the colony, all the frames. You probably want to burn your apiary suit, your bee suit, anything that comes in contact with that colony, because the potential of the spores being found on the equipment, that's how it gets spread, is through those inactive spores. We do have a new resource for fighting American foul brood. Dallin Animal Health is a company, probably Mark can speak better to this than I can, but they were the first ones to develop a vaccine for bees. And the first one they developed, at least for bees, was it targets American foul brood. And the way that vaccine works is they put the vaccine into a pollen patty or some type of feed. And the nurse bees are the ones that are eating the pollen patty, because it's the nurse bees that are making the royal jelly to feed the queen. Their mandibular gland and their hypopharyngeal gland, that's what they use to create the royal jelly. So then they're feeding the queen the royal jelly. The queen ingests the vaccine because it's being transferred by the nurse bees to the queen, exposing her to the inactive AFB bacteria. And then as she's laying her eggs, those eggs get exposed to a vaccine fragment. Is that right, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, good enough, or close enough, resulting in more resistance to the American foul brood. So this is something that is a brand new novel approach to treating honeybees. And it's just new on the market last year or two.
Yeah, it's basically the second year.
Or so.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to purchase queens that have you have to purchase the queens. Is that how that works? Directly from the company, or?
No, from one of the people that'll have it. So
Okay, so they have breeders that
the only reason is because that little vial that they have
right?
treats 50.
Okay.
So you wouldn't buy it for anybody in their backyard or.
Okay. Yeah, so this is really being targeted for commercial beekeepers. We really, as I said before, don't have a huge issue with American foul brood. It tends to be isolated in pockets. I know that talking to a couple beekeepers up in the Eureka area on the northern California coast, several of them say, oh yeah, you never want to get bees from this valley over here because there's American fallow brood there. So probably years ago, they had an outbreak and it's still just kind of lingering. So, all right, next up, we're gonna talk about, oh yes, Judy?
Yeah, if the nurse bees are creating the royal jelly,
Uh-huh.
do they not feed that to the larvae as well? And can the larvae be vaccinated?
That would be a Mark question.
Yeah.
I used to work for Dallin.
Yeah, it was working down. So the way they do it is I would have a box that I have 50 queens in.
Mhm.
And then the candy I would make up would have the vial mixed into it. We had a nice little video of it. Yeah, so then that's fed to them over 7 days. They sit in that box, 6 to 7 days. And then all those. Now, can we? Sure, but those nurse bees only live for the next, like 2 weeks.
Right, so they're not laying the eggs, so the
Yeah.
eggs are the ones that are benefiting, the next generation is benefiting from the queen having ingested the vaccine.
Right,
correct?
so then you
But
have
aren't they feeding the larvae?
yeah, so they could be feeding the larvae, but that larvae will also only live for a short amount of time. And that would be a small amount, because it's really like, I don't know, 300 bees or less. Put in a 50,000 bee colony, it ends up being a tiny little. Really, the way they did it was to ensure that when that queen is done, I can say that she's vaccinated sufficiently. As opposed to I can put it in a hive, maybe we got enough, and that was the whole problem with the way they had 5 other ways they wanted to try it, but this was the way they confirmed it.
So we do have new options that are constantly, not constantly, we have new options that are coming down the pipeline. All right, so for European foul brood, this is also a very highly contagious brood disease, but it's not nearly as deadly as American foul brood. It's caused by a bacterium Melococcus pluto. The larvae die just before it is capped. And European foul brood is considered a stress disease, and it frequently disappears with a nectar flow. You'll find that a lot of the diseases that we have, we don't necessarily have treatments. They do tend to naturally just go away. European foul brood can often go away by itself. So what does European foul brood look like? So the larvae, they start to turn different colors. They go from yellowish to brown to dark colored. And they're going to start twisting in their cells. So you can see how it's no longer C-shaped. It's no longer pearly white. They're twisting kind of in and around in their cells. Also, once they get a little bit darker, you can often see the tracheal net. And those are the breathing tubes within the bee larvae there. So how do we treat European foul brood? Well, one option is to requeen. Requeening is always adding new genetics into the hive. Oftentimes, perhaps the immunity is stronger with a new queen, so requeen is always an option. Another thing that we can do with European foul brood is to treat with antibiotics. That is an option. But starting in 2017, a prescription or a veterinary feed directive is now required to get antibiotics. It used to be we just went down to the feed store, we could pick up whatever antibiotics we needed to treat our bees, and there we went. But there's a real big concern about the resistance with antibiotics, and that's a huge concern. And so the federal government decided that we needed to be a little more serious about handing out our antibiotics. So again, in 2017, they passed a law. We now need to go through a vet. How do we find a vet? So we go to the Honeybee Veterinary Consortium, hbvc.org. And this is where you are going to have an opportunity to search for a vet near you. They do have a place on their website where you can type in your zip code and up will pop maybe a veterinarian. Okay. This is where it's become very difficult to get antibiotics. I know I went through this exercise a couple of years ago when I was putting this presentation together just to see what would come up. And I think one vet came up and they were in Fresno and I live in Shingle Springs. So it was a long way off. So this is a problematic thing to get antibiotics for our colonies, but truthfully, we're not using nearly as many antibiotics as we used to. We used to use antibiotics prophylactically to avoid getting American foul brood. That practice has pretty much disappeared. I'm sure there's a beekeeper or two still doing it if they can get the antibiotics. But again, there was such an overabundant use of antibiotics within beekeeping, they really did need to do something. But like with the European foul brood, oftentimes that disease will just clear up by itself. If you do choose to treat with antibiotics, understand that that hive needs to be taken out of production for a period of time because of the contamination of antibiotics in the colony, in the hive. All right, moving on. Now we're talking about chalk brood, another wonderful fun disease in the colony. So this is caused by a spore-forming fungus. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one. The larvae ingest the spores and they die off at about 6 to 7 days of age. This is the only disease that can actually be diagnosed from outside of the colony. And the reason for that is that these little mummies that get created after the larvae die, the bees remove them from the cell and they throw them right out the front door. So we as beekeepers, if we are observant and you're looking at the flight in the front door and you're looking around the front door, you may see some chalk brood. I will tell you that I've not seen any chalk brood in hobbyist hives around the Northern California area. I have seen it in commercial hives. So they say to keep strong colonies and requeen with a hygienic strain if you have persistent problems with chalk brood. I'm also told that improving ventilation can help prevent chalk brood. I won't even begin to talk about ventilation because there are so many opinions, diametrically opposed opinions about ventilation in the beekeeping industry. I will leave that for someone else. Okay, chalk brood, again, you're going to have a spotty brood pattern, and then you will actually be able to see the little chalked mummies in the cells. And again, the bees are going to pull them out of the cells and push them out the front door, and you see them all, they're sitting there on the front porch. Sac brood is our last brood disease that we're going to talk about. This is caused by a virus. It does not usually result in severe losses of our colonies. It's most common during the spring buildup. The only known treatment is to requeen your colony, and it usually disappears with a nectar flow. All right. But again, it's important to understand if your colony is not well. So with sac brood, what happens is the pupa fails to pupate, and it has this little shrunken head that pokes up like that. The larvae is going to change from pearly white to kind of a dull yellowish gray color, eventually more towards black. And if you were to have like a pair of entomology tweezers, which are just tweezers with soft edges there, you could literally pull that whole larvae out, or the pupae, excuse me, out, and it's going to be filled like in a sack. It's going to just look like a sack full of liquid there. All right, now we're moving on to adult bee diseases. So nosema is caused by the spore-forming microsporidian parasite, Nosema apis or Nosema ceranae. We've all had the pleasure now to go through a pandemic, so we're all really well versed in how the variants, they change and they just keep changing and they're novel and we don't have any response to them. So the original form of Nosema was our Nosema apis, and that has now been overtaken by Nosema ceranae. So we all kind of heard about CCD back in, 2006 or 9? Early 2000s. This turned out to be one of the problems. So there were multiple issues that helped define colony collapse disorder. One of the things that happened was at the time, Nosema ceranae was bypassing Nosema apis, and the bees had no answer for it. So right there, that was a huge hit for the bees. Also during that time, we had 2 of our 3 synthetic miticides fail. So the Varroa count was out of control and the viruses they were vectoring were out of control. Those were two of the things that they're saying right now that were part of the colony collapse disorder. All right, so Nosema ceranae is now our most dominant form of Nosema, and this variant is often seen in the summer. Nosema apis was more of a fall winter disease. Our new Nosema is more of a summer disease. Adult bees ingest the spores. The spores germinate and multiply in the lining in the midgut. And then they get shed into the digestive tract of the bee, and then the spores come out through the feces. So in a bee, there's two stomachs, so actually three. You have your honey crop where the honey gets stored when they take it back to the colony. You have your midgut, and that's where all of the nutrition absorption goes in. And so when these microsporidium attack the lining of that midgut, they're essentially like plugging up all the little holes that all the nutrients are coming into, and the bee literally starves to death. In the hindgut, that is where all the acids are going for the digestion, and then out the back. Okay, so we just talked about invasive digestive tract. Spores shed in the bee feces, and so dysentery is often seen with Nosema when Nosema is present, but it's not caused by Nosema. So oftentimes people will see, you know, this right here is an example of bee diarrhea essentially on the colony. So when people see this, you know, they're going to say, oh, I have Nosema. Well, you may have Nosema. Diarrhea can be caused by other things, but it is often present when Nosema is present. So how do we diagnose Nosema? The diagnosis requires specialized equipment. It's done through microscopy. So again, we can send off samples to Beltsville, Maryland, and they can confirm if we have Nosema or not. But again, how are we treating Nosema? We're basically keeping our colonies strong and well fed. All right, this is probably something that you may have seen here. So we have parasitic mite syndrome, otherwise known as PMS. And this is caused by Varroa destructor. So what do we have? Spotty brood pattern, always a spotty brood pattern with diseases. Infested brood are being removed. So you're going to see a lot of uncapping going on when you have high mites, because the bees are detecting that there's mites and they're uncapping to get rid of them. Especially if you are running queens that have any type of hygienic behavior, they will be very much keyed to uncapping those cells. And so they're removing the infested brood when that's happening. Failure to thrive is just kind of this overall malaise in the hive when you have PMS. You know, they're not bringing in a honey crop, they're not growing, they're just kind of a dink, they're just not doing anything. Bees can also be really aggressive when you have high mites. I had a couple clients, even though I work with clients and I tell them the right way to do things, sometimes they do their own thing. And sometimes they end up with really high mites. And a couple of my clients did end up with high mites this year. And I've got to tell you, those were the hottest bees I've ever worked. I don't like that. Working hot bees is not for me. Anyway, seeing bees with deformed wings. Again, it's one of the only viruses that we can actually physically see the result of the virus. And then also the sudden summer or fall collapse happens with PMS. If you have a big booming hive, those are always the ones that collapse, right? You think, oh my God, I've got this strong boomer, it's going through the summer. All of a sudden it's dead in October. And you're like, what happened? Well, again, the bee population is peaking in July. By mid-July, that population is now headed down because they're going to be in a dormant state come December. That mite population is still going up. They're peaking a month after the bees are peaking. So the bee population is already decreasing and the mite population is still going up. And that's when you get your collapses that happen in the fall. So PMS, we have high Varroa infestation. The exact cause of PMS is not known. I mean, we all know that Varroa is the problem, but what it is that triggers this syndrome, we don't know. Spotty brood, dead brood found in the cells that are discolored, turning a yellow or brown to dark brown. Oftentimes it can resemble AFB, but the larvae do not rove out. It could also look like EFB and sac brood. I mean, sometimes people will, refer to the larvae looking like snot. It's just snotty brood, and that could just be PMS. It's just not healthy generally. All right, next we're going to move on to a new mite. This is Tropolaelaps. I say Mercedes-i. I think that it's pronounced a little different. I just want everyone to know it is not currently here in North America. But I just want to give you a little lesson on tropy here. So this is Varroa right here. This is Tropolaelaps. So it's about the same height, but only about a third in the width. It actually has 4 sets of legs. So these right here are actually legs that are often kind of attenuated like antenna when they're walking around. So this is Tropolaelaps. It is following the same migratory trajectory as Varroa did. So it's all kind of starting right here and moving this way. We have big concerns about Tropolaelaps coming to North America. One of our larger concerns was many, many years ago, the Canadians closed the border and are no longer importing packages and queens from America. They were concerned that we were going to bring small hive beetle up to them. They were concerned that Africanized bees were going to move up, so they closed the borders. So they have been importing bees from all around the world. A lot of them come from Australia, but a lot of them come from Ukraine.
Oh.
And Ukraine is kind of preoccupied right now with some other things. So there has been a lot of outreach going on to the Canadians over the last several years. They have since stopped importing queens from Ukraine, so that is good. But again, when the mites hit our continent, borders are not going to mean anything. The mites are just going to go wherever they go. So Tropolaelaps, again, this is Tropy right here on the left, and we have 2 Varroa. So it's a very pale, almost translucent little mite. It needs honeybee brood to reproduce, just like our Varroa. But unlike our Varroa, it reproduces much faster. It spends the majority of its time under the cap. So we all know that the majority of our miticides are killing above the cap. So already that becomes more problematic. It feeds on multiple sites on the pupae. So our Varroa, they open up one feeding hole, and that's on the fat body tissue. And so when they're raising their brood, all the brood is eating in one spot. Not so with Tropolaelaps. They open feeding holes all over the pupae. So when that bee is born, if it got eaten right here, it might be born with a kinked wing or antenna that doesn't work or a leg that's bent or something. So with Tropolaelaps infestation in your hives, now we're seeing a lot more deformities within our bees, in addition to the vectoring of the viruses. So it's a bad one. So now we're going to take 10 minutes. So Project Avis M is a nonprofit organization here in the United States, and their primary focus is to fundraise money for bee research. In addition to bee research, they're also doing a lot of immediate needs type of things. So when Tropolaelaps came to the forefront as being something that beekeepers decided we need to be proactive about, when Varroa hit our shores, 1, we didn't know it was coming, and 2, we didn't have a single answer for it. It came in 1987, and we still don't really have an answer for Varroa. We have the opportunity now to do something about the next mite that's coming. So Project Avis M has been very forward thinking. They sent the apiary inspectors of every state here in America over to Thailand so that they could get firsthand experience learning how to identify the mites in the hives. And anyway, so Project Apis M, they sponsored this whole thing to send everybody over there. They also put together 4 videos on Tropicale Labs. We're going to see one tonight. If you're interested in viewing the others, just go to YouTube and go to Project Apis M's site. All right. Just one second, we'll be there shortly.
We need elevator music. I'll shout.
So how does everybody's bees look? Everybody's shutting down, slowing down. You got lots of stores in your top box. Good. Is everybody done with their final treatments this year? I think so. Not yet, maybe. Have you pulled your honey supers?
Yeah.
Good, good. You had a question?
Yeah, on the foul brood
Uh-huh,
and the larvae,
uh-huh.
you said get a little stick or cute and pull up the larvae. That strand, you say is about an inch, that means it's foul brood.
If it ropes out an inch or more, it's American foul brood.
So if it's a good one, what would be the characteristics of that? When you pull it out?
Well, if it was not American foul brood, it would not rope.
Snaps on.
It would just snap off. Yeah, that would be the difference. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we
Alright,
ready?
just click on play, or just click right there. Ready?
Yep.
You'll hear it. Let's just have sound right away.
Oh, do I need my sound out?
Oh, oh no, it should go through the- Okay.
More concerned with that than something like that.
Can you hear that?
Tropicale Labs is species of mite, somewhat similar to Varroa, but with some distinct differences. It's a mite species that we're hoping we can keep away from the US, but we want to be researching over here, where it's at to see what we can manage and how you can actually kill the mite.
My whole industry is just panicked about the not if, but when Tropicale Labs will come. That's spooky, and no, we don't know anything about it. I'd say the top
Hobbyist beekeepers will have.
Oh, I gotta turn that in. Oh, there we go.
Okay. Hobbyist beekeepers would have a much easier time dealing with trophy than commercial beekeepers. Commercial beekeepers want big booming hives. They don't want brood breaks. If there's brood breaks, there's no big hives, no big hives for pollination, no big hives for the honey crop. So this is going to be a huge impact for commercial beekeepers. The video mentioned that Formic Pro works as well as brood breaks, right? Well, the videos I've seen of the Formic Pro are horrible. We all, for those of us who have used Formic Pro, we already know of the love-hate relationship we have. Kills our queens, the queen shut down during treatment. You know, there's a lot of problems with Formic. Well, the videos that I were watching, they were dipping paddles into almost pure formic acid and shoving it in the front door. Almost everybody absconded out of the hive, and eventually some bees did go back in, but you're looking at that going, this is the solution? So I don't know. It's best that we never get them. But I wanted to make you aware of this because education is important, and we all have to be on the outlook because we don't know when and where the first mite is ever going to show up. So you all got to see a little bit of what that mite looks like. So a quick review, we have American foul brood, we have European foul brood, chalk brood, sac brood, we have our parasitic mite syndrome, and we have tropolaelaps. Deformed wing, the viruses from both our mites. Thank you so much for your attention today, and I'd like to open up the floor for questions, if I could answer them.
If you want to record your question and answer, you can, there's a mic wandering around too.
Oh,
Yes,
there's a
there we
mic
go.
right behind.
Yep, just
Did
turn it
anyone
on.
have a question?
You don't have to report it, it just.
How common is the American foul brood in this area?
Oh, make
Not
sure-
at all. So American foul brood is not very common here in the United States. As I mentioned before, it tends to be pocketed. There's isolated areas throughout the United States that has it. I don't know of any American foul brood here. So I saw American foul brood in classroom situation when I was going through the program, and I've seen American foul brood once in a hive in North Dakota, but I've not seen it here.
Judy, and our tracheal mites no longer a problem anymore.
Oh, okay, so tracheal mites is another mite that was actually in beekeeping before I became a beekeeper. So by the time I started beekeeping, tracheal mites were already gone. And they believe that a lot of the treatments that we're using for varroa took care of those tracheal mites. Any other questions?
What is the brood break? What does that mean?
A brood break basically means that the queen has stopped laying, so there is no brood. So both tropolaelaps, and varroa need to eat off of that puping, off of the brood in order to reproduce. So if we cage our queen so that she's not able to lay any eggs, we are essentially providing a brood break. Whenever you do have a brood break, whether it be a natural one or one that you create, that is also a really good time to treat for varroa. It's kind of the exception to the rule in my book. I'm a big believer in testing to know what your mite loads are before you treat. And then you always want to test afterward to make sure your treatment actually worked. But with a brood break, you essentially have no brood. So there's no reproduction going on, which we can do as hobbyist beekeepers quite easily. But if you're a commercial beekeeper, if you're doing brood breaks, you're going to have much smaller colonies because you're stopping the queen from laying eggs for 1 or 2 weeks. Oh, I was going to say about treating. So whenever you have a brood break, for example, in December is when we would naturally have a brood break because the queen goes dormant, or usually, hopefully she goes dormant. We've had some warm winters where the queens did not stop laying, but usually queens are going to stop laying in December. So that means that any mite that still remains in the colony is now on the adult bees. So in December is the perfect time to do a mite treatment. That is when I do an oxalic dribble. Why? Because all the mites, again, are exposed. So an oxalic dribble is going to be very, very effective. And people say, well, you're opening up the hive in December? What's that all about, right? You don't ever do that. Well, that's not true. We're treating our livestock. We're opening up that hive for probably 30 seconds. We're not pulling any frames. We're cracking it open. We're dribbling the oxalic acid between the frames. If the brood is moved up, we try to get a little bit in the upper box. We close it up. We're done in 30 seconds, essentially. So again, we're taking advantage of a brood break. In those situations, I don't test beforehand and I don't test afterwards. It's just taking advantage of a situation. So you had a question.
Do you prefer doing it that way than the vaporization?
So I personally don't do any vaporization because if you are vaporizing oxalic acid, you need to be wearing the proper respirator for acid, not just, a little mask. You need to be wearing the proper PPE. So I personally don't want to suit up, have a full respirator on to do the vaporization. So I personally do not vaporize. Vaporizing is a very good way to do the oxalic acid. It's very effective. Bees do really well with it, but that's just my own personal preference. Yeah. Any other questions? Sheree.
Question. So, I know that, Tom had asked about the brood breaks, brood breaks. So what are some of the common ways that you can do a brood break as a hobbyist?
As a hobby,
Yeah.
okay.
Thoughts?
One way you can create a brood break is to cage your queen. So they have what they call push-in cages, where it's essentially just some hardware cloth bent, and they could be a variety of sizes, but usually they're probably about that size, and you just push that wire into the wax comb with the queen behind there. So you're basically capturing the queen and making her stay within a small area. So she can still be fed by by her nurse bees and stuff. She's still in the colony, all is well, but she's not laying eggs everywhere. So again, the eggs are only in this small spot, and that's enough that the mites are still going to be on the backs. They're not all going to be under those few small caps. So that would be one way.
Thank you. We have found here in the valley that our queens hardly take a break at all.
Okay, I'm
And-
so sorry.
And they, oh, no, I know.
No, I mean,
Which makes.
it's hard
which makes
because
that
queens
important.
don't get a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
So I
right.
think the brood breaks are probably gonna be, as far as the future, it's gonna be maybe a more common practice,
Yes.
especially down here, because of the fact that our queens are just constantly laying. They
Right.
really.
Right.
Yeah. Gonna just keep
So
going.
if queens are not getting a brood break, that's also a really good reason why you would need to requeen so that you have young, vigorous queens. That brood break during December is a chance for that queen to kind of rest from laying eggs. When she goes out to get mated, she has a finite amount of sperm stored inside her internal spermatheca. When that sperm runs out, she's done. So again, the fact that your queens aren't slowing down means that queens can run out of sperm and then they become drone laying queens. So again, keeping young queens, vigorous queens in your colony will help with all of this, because again, when the queens start slowing down, everything in the colony just is not working on all cylinders, if you will. All right, yeah.
How old is a young queen? You want to keep your queen young.
So commercial beekeepers usually work with 1-year queens. If she's a super gal, they might keep her 2 years. So I would say for hobbyists, you definitely want to have a 1 or 2 year queen. By year 3, she kind of needs to go. Sorry, but.
How long is normally the brood break for you? Like, what do you consider a normal?
Okay, so a brood break, you need to have at least, I think, 18 days so that all the brood that is currently capped has the opportunity to emerge. Yes. All right. Uh-huh.
Bee veterinarians,
Yes.
Oh,
I took an online course for that,
Okay,
so I'm certified supposedly as a veterinarian for bees. But I don't know if that's,
I don't know if taking that course certifies you.
Yeah, wow.
You have to have yes,
In
the vet
California.
credentials as well.
more to it than just what I.
Yes, yes, because I've taken that, I've seen all those videos as well, but I'm not certified. You have to be a vet that has the knowledge of honeybees. And that's really kind of where we're in a bind, because most vets do not have knowledge on honeybees. So since 2017, there's been a big push to educate veterinarians. As I just mentioned earlier, there are not a lot of vets near us that do bees. If you are a rancher, a farmer, if you have livestock and you have a vet that you are currently working with your other livestock, it would be a really great thing to reach out to that vet and say, hey, I also have honeybees. And there may come a time where I need, a veterinary feed directive. And can you do that for me? Can you go get certified about that?
And they're required to have a certain amount of continuing credits or
Mhm.
something. So they need to take so many classes.
Right.
You suggesting that may be a help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did
Oh.
I did a search while you were doing
Uh-huh.
on that website, and the closest one to 95240 is Carmel.
Carmel? Oh, gosh, okay. See, this is a problem. This really is a problem.
You know, I have a rural vet, she's a large animal vet, but she comes out to our house, right? Because we're out in the country to do all our our livestock guardian dogs and all of our outdoor barn cats, like their shots. And so of course she sees, I always give her honey, but she sees the hives out there. So I've talked to her and she's mentioned about the continuing education, because they have to keep doing that. But I know that if,
Line from Michigan State.
yeah, there's several.
Did that.
Well, and the thing is, it's like, so I know, and this is where if you have a good relationship or rapport with your veterinarian, I think that they would be able to help you. If you have an ongoing relationship, they'd probably be able to help you out if you needed something. But that's where you want to be educated about what the dosage and stuff
Right.
should be, just to help them. But it would be great to encourage more vets in the area.
Yes, again, very much so.
Hmm.
Because as we now know, Carmel is the closest one.
Yeah, I was within like 200 miles.
This doesn't have a program or a first event.
I'm surprised too. Yeah.
We won't talk about it.
Okay.
You should email them, Jackie, and more people should email them and make sure they know that that's something
That
they
would
should
be a great
invest in.
resource that they could provide. but
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they do not. I think UC Davis was involved with some of the training videos that are now available for vets, but they don't have anyone that can write that feed directive for you. All right, any other questions? Well, thank you all so much for your attention tonight. I appreciate it.
Oh,
Sandy?
oh.
I just wanted to point out, you have some cards back here.
Oh, yes.
Oh, thank you.
Have cards here.
Yeah.
Also, if I may,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
January, don't know what date, it's on my website. I am going to be teaching a course on preparing for spring. So we do a deep dive into what the biology behind swarming is, and then we go into all the different management techniques of splitting and what you do during the spring. So if you're at all interested in taking the class, I'm up in Shingle Springs. If you go to my website, bees.sandyhonigsberg.com, it's on my cards, you can go there to sign up as well. Again, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Very interesting.